The Eternals released their first trailer.
Yes. Yes, I am excited for this. I don't really, I'll admit I don't know too much about the Eternals, nor do I really like I haven't read their comics or anything like that. Like I read like Spider-Man comics and I've read other comics in the Marvel, universe. So I'm familiar with most of the Marvel universe, but there's a good chunk of it that I'm not, and this is one of that chunk. I really didn't know much about the Eternals, so it's one of those where I'm like, when I saw the project announced, I was, okay, great, I'm excited, but what is this that I'm watching? And so, if you're also like me and had no idea what they were watching or what this movie was, essentially, what these are is this is a group of people that was created by the Celestials. And if you remember, one of the Celestials was Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which was what's his face's dad.
Chris Pratt's Star-Lord's dad.
Star-Lord's dad, yeah. Star-Lord's dad was Ego, who's one of the Celestials. Celestials are the beings that basically kind of like they're the most powerful beings that existed at the beginning of time in the Marvel universe, and will always exist essentially unless they're killed in some weird meaningful way, such as Ego. But essentially that's the way they are. They're Celestials. They created a couple different races, one being the Eternals. And the Eternals they all have powers, and if you look at them, they're all like, kind of Justice League type of feel to them, where somebody can fly, somebody has super speed, somebody's got is good with machines and stuff, somebody's good at controlling minds. Like they all have certain powers that make them unique. And but what's kind of fun about them is that they've been around for centuries and millennia. And so in the Marvel universe, they have their hands in majority of things that happen, as far as like influencing different civilizations, helping out in different ways to advance them. And that's why you see, for instance, they show, I can't remember all of their names, and that's going to be a problem. But they show some of them basically a part of cultures, and that's why like their ethnicities kind of reflect the ethnicities of the areas that they influence. So that also plays a factor into it. And essentially, they that's what they are. They just are beings that live forever and have all of these abilities, and they help to influence or guide humans, and they really don't interact or basically participate in wars and things that we have, but they do their best to basically help us along as advances in technology and watching over us. There's questions to be asked, of course, in how or why they weren't present during the whole what's it called, the whole happening in
Avengers
the,
Infinity War. Thank you
yeah,
for the
Infinity
Falcon
War.
part, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. But the whole Infinity War and all that, those are questions where were they, that kind of thing. And I'm sure that'll be addressed, or at least referenced. But essentially that's what the Eternals are. They're just powerful beings. Now the other thing too is there, while they were also made by the Celestials also made the Deviants, is what they're called. And the Deviants, they're another group of people that are seen as more like evil-ish, I guess, in the comics, opposed to the Eternals. One of the deviants, or somebody that is part deviant, would be Thanos, for instance. So that kind of obviously shows that there, as far as the power and the ability to wield the Infinity Stones. That was part, it was because he was part deviant, part eternal, celestial, whatever. So there's all that. So I'm curious as to see what's going to happen. They fight a lot in the comics, from what I gather, with the deviants, so that could be a major part of the plot. Now there was a bunch of things in the trailer that were interesting. One, I don't know if did you see all of like the Captain America references, which were weird, like the Shield references?
The
So
Shield, no. The comment at the end, like about who's going to lead the Avengers. That's what were you talking about?
no, so if you look back at the trailer, because I watched like a breakdown of the trailer, there's parts in the trailer where essentially, if you look at like the shields that people are using in the background, they literally, like, they're metal shields that don't have color to them, but the shapes that are on the shields, they're like concentric rings with like a star in the center. And they're like, so like that's obviously hardcore inspired by like the Captain America shield. And then if you look at, there's a scene where the the shorter, smaller one that looks like a kid, but it's obviously like immortal. Um, she is like getting drunk on like a train or something, and Captain America's like shield from when he was like not like he was like a fake Captain America doing like all the advertising and stuff. He appeared, or that shield is like in the background of the shot, like just sitting like on the mantle and
Oh,
stuff.
really?
Yeah, there's like four different references to like Captain America's shield and the thing, which is like interesting. But that was kind of odd. That was kind of a fun part. So when you go to watch the trailer again, look out for those because it's pretty funny to see them. And then and I think the shield that's in that when she's getting drunk on the train, the shield's like on the top right part of the screen.
I know,
So
I'm
when
looking
you're
at that scene right now and I'm like, did you see it in... Oh, okay. I could see it. Yeah, I had to bend back a little bit, but yeah, I see it now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's what I'm saying. Some like weird references to it, which is like fun because I guess like obviously the Avengers would be happening at this point in time during the universe. So like, why wouldn't the Eternals know about it or be participating in it potentially? So that's unsurprising.
I hope it's a like they're like she's a fangirl, fanboy, like they fanboy more like it's a TV show and a movie in the same way that we do. And I have a feeling that's what it's going to be like based on the comment of like who's going to lead the Avengers or whatever. That's where I think they're going with it, which would be a great angle to both put it into perspective how little that conflict meant to them and maybe explain a little bit more. But yeah, that little name drop, I thought that was funny. So I hope that's the angle they take with it.
Like I said, I'm curious as to how it'll all be, because the other thing too is you have to like the way that you go about improving like on the next phases of the Marvel universe and get to a point where you're surpassing what you did with Thanos and Infinity War and all that, which was 11 years of building to get to a crazy point. You have to up the ante somehow. Now, the way that works is bringing in groups like the Eternals who are super powerful and everything. But my question is like I'm curious to see like how they fit in, because like if that's the case and they just didn't really care to interact and it was more of like a show for them, then like my question is like what gives them incentive to do it in the future? So like you really have to up the ante then for them to participate in the future.
Yeah.
And then my mind goes to like, well, if they're that powerful, like wouldn't they just be like, wouldn't they not need like Spider-Man and stuff? Cause like, they're too powerful anyways. So I'm curious to see how, because that's the problem in the comics, unfortunately, when you start bringing in this whole thing. And they did such a good job of it in like the first, obviously, for 3 phases or whatever that led to Infinity War and all that. But they did a great job of like balancing out like, okay, who like, yeah, we have these super powerful beings and all that, but like, they're able to play their part in, stopping Thanos. Whereas like, the Eternals, I feel like would probably just stop them. Like I feel like they are powerful enough to do it. So, like, how do you balance that with like the superheroes you already have established that maybe aren't that great? So,
yeah, power leveling and all that. I'm curious how they do that too, because immediately as soon as I heard of this movie being announced, I was like, okay, like that's cool, but what are they like? What matches up against them? What's their incentives? Like, at what point are we going to get to the point where it's like just gods, because that's like the top level you could do, and then it's questions like, oh, who cares about what's below them?
Well, that's why like getting Thor even was like, even before it was like, how are you going to balance Thor being a part of a group of people like Iron Man and stuff? But like they did such a good job of it. But then again, that's only one man and one person. Whereas like, how do you balance that with, literally a group of them that are literally just made to be immortal gods, in the comics? And how am I going to take Blade seriously, who's a half vampire, half human, like in the same universe as like these literal gods? I don't know. We'll see how they balance it. They probably have a plan, I would presume. They've done this before, so
Yeah,
not like they're not going into it with a plan. So I'm sure they have something to make it all enticing and reasonable. But it's just it does raise questions of like, what is going to make them, because like if you watch this trailer, there's really not a lot of like, this is the bad guy, this is who they're going against. Like you're just, the whole trailer is like, hey, here's them, like, you know, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like who are they going against, like what are they, what's the conflict here, like what, who's you know, big enough and bad enough to force them to have to fight, like, you know, it's just, there's a lot of questions that the trailer arises, but also a lot of questions that intrigue me and make me excited to watch it because it's a whole different part of the universe that I don't really know too well. So
And it's like the
yeah,
same
it's
sort of
just,
question that they've had ever since the Avengers. Is like, oh, okay, this story's happening, and it's like an apocalyptic event. Like, where are the Avengers? Like, why doesn't that come up? So
Mhm.
I imagine they've had years to address it, and I'm sure look them up for some reason. You would think.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's just like I said, it's going to be a tough challenge for them to balance superheroes like Spider-Man, who you would expect to be a big part of the Avengers moving forward because of how they did it in Far From Home and everything. You would in almost basically him taking over for Iron Man is essentially like kind of replacing that role as what they were really referencing literally the entire Far From Home movie.
Yeah.
So like it's one of those where, you know, how do you balance him being there when you have all of these people who are literal immortal beings that could care less about, you know, if it really is that they couldn't care less about Thanos and that's why they didn't participate, like that then like what power level is it going to have to be for the bad person, you know, the bad guy, to make them come out and fight? And then is that power level going to be such to a point that like having Spider-Man's basically inevitable, or not even, you know, reasonable? So
Yeah.
it's interesting. We'll see how they balance it. The other thing I do want to point out that I saw in their breakdown, and I watched, for everyone out there that's interested, I watched the new Rockstars breakdown of it. New Rockstars is an awesome YouTube channel that breaks down all this stuff and gives you all the nerd stuff that you love. So I watch their breakdowns of the trailers and everything, so I know at least is enough where I go into it understanding all the references, which helps me enjoy the movie more, I feel. And part of what they were saying too that I thought was interesting was they were talking about how in the Black Panther movie, which we talked about in our last podcast coming up, is based around the Wakandans battling the Atlanteans. And I guess there was references in this where potentially maybe we're seeing how the Celestials failed human society basically when the Atlanteans were uh, basically not defeated, but like not defeated or erased, but like pushed
Yeah.
to the sea kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, or the city of Atlantis was pushed underwater kind of thing, and they failed them. So, like maybe we see that in there, and then also there's this, there's like a scene where she's handing, there's a knife being exchanged, and people thought that that knife looked a lot like the tip of the spear, the trident that the king of Atlantis uses. So maybe that plays a role. It's just, it's interesting. I'm really intrigued. There's a whole lot of ways that this can go, and it's a, you know, group of people or beings that people really, you know, the common Marvel enjoyer doesn't really know at all. So they can go a lot of different ways and they can play it a lot of different ways. So I'm just intrigued to see what it is and if it's one of those where that's, and this is one of those reasons why Superman is always kind of an issue, because Superman's just so powerful that you're like, what can really be like that threatening to him?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's always hard to watch like Superman stuff or Superman be a part of, because you're like, yeah, he's cool and all that, and yeah, obviously he's iconic, but it's just like, you know, like is there really going to create a villain that's bad enough to like make a difference and be like good enough to fight against him? So with this, I'm kind of hoping that is able to play out, you know.
Yeah. Yep. And if you usually do like villains like that, I feel one of the more interesting ways is to make it not about like fighting. I'm trying to think. There was a perfect example in my head and snapped away, but it wasn't so much about being able to like fight them or like battle them or whatever. It was more about like what they could do and kind of like, I don't know. I feel like it was hurting people around you. There was some movie that did this really well. It's going to come to me after this is over, but not making it about fighting exclusively because that's too easy. More of making it about something entirely different, which I feel like that's what they would go with a movie like this, maybe, or something similar. But yeah, and also, boom, Jon Snow's in this movie too. Just wanted to point that part out. That part was really cool.
Yeah, I heard he was. I heard he's like somebody. He's like called the Black Knight
Black
or
Knight.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's supposed
So
to get a really cool sword, and it's like a sword. It's a sword that can cut through anything, I believe, anything except for a mark like one or two things in the world. So kind of a cool character progression. He kind of gets a reboot into into like being able to fulfill that sword character type of demographic. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I don't think he was supposed to be. I don't know if he was supposed to be in this movie. I thought he was supposed to be get his own side movie or something. I was surprised he popped up in this because I don't think he was. I don't think he was supposed to be in it. I think it was more of a cameo. Could be wrong.
no. Either way, I'm excited to see it. Good actors, you make a good movie, and I'm all here for it.
Yeah. So him along with Rob Stark get to do their Game of Thrones thing once more.
Yep.